want to give a shout out to my guy, Graphk Raider, for having an awesome interview with Raiders safety Trey Taylor. And coming up here on today's show, I'm going to give you my biggest takeaways from the interview. If you haven't already seen it, go check it out. It's like a 53-minute show. It's a live show, really, really cool. If you want to know what the thumbnail looks like, it's right here. Also, in the description and comments on this show, we're going to be able to put the link for you guys down there below. If you don't already, go watch, subscribe to the OLV Raiders Network, hosted by my good buddy, Graphk Raider, because Trey Taylor, he's a really, really good dude, man. And just all these takeaways that you're going to see, we're going to talk about players, we're going to talk about family, and I think I have like 16 or 17 takeaways from this entire interview. The first thing that I saw was that, he watched a lot of Jamal Adams, he said, growing up. He also made a comment about he had a connection with Clay Matthews, which kind of made me wonder old Green Bay days. Do Getsy, is there any overlap there at whatsoever? But the reason why that I found the Jamal Adams comparison and the thought behind it was because Adams, when he was first coming out of the NFL, he came from LSU. He was very, very highly regarded as a great leader, goes to the New York Jets, turns out to be a really, really good player, gets traded for 2 first-round picks to go to the Seattle Seahawks, and then I think, honestly, he just got lazy. Now I think he's a shitty human being, but when you look at the type of player that he is, you could tell that, Jamal was this box safety, somebody who's not very good at covering, but when you watch a lot of Trey Taylor's tape, you kind of see some flashes early on there of Jamal Adams. I just hope that Taylor's career transcends a little bit better than what Adams' did, though if Taylor gets paid the way Adams did, I'm sure he'd be happy with it. Let's go to the next thing here. The best part about the interview, Graph, and I hope that you don't take offense to this, is hearing Trey Taylor talk about his grandmother, and it's a little bit earlier on in the interview, and I'm telling you right now, you guys got to go watch it because it's probably one of the coolest freaking stories that I have ever heard. So apparently, when they're sitting there waiting for him to get, drafted, and I'm sure that's a very long and just crazy day. His grandmother apparently had 2 hats at the draft party because she thought that one of the 2 teams that she already had a hat picked out was going to draft him. Then, as soon as Taylor gets the phone call from Antonio Pierce, Grandma already knew who was on the phone, hands him the Las Vegas Raiders hat, and she has already purchased Raider season tickets for this upcoming season. I'll tell you this right now, Grandma, that's a real one right there. So you can already see in this picture here that he's got the hat on during his draft party. So for Grandma to say, she just had a gut feeling, she had a feeling, and they always say, mothers know best. Grandmas know best too. Trey Taylor, man, the grandma, I want y'all to show some love to Grandma Trey. And Trey, if you end up watching the show and you call her something, I call my grandma Grandma. I also know a lot of people that call them, what do you call your grandmother?
Nana.
Nana? There's Nana, I've heard Mimi,
I'm white, so my grandmas have weird names.
Abuela, there's a bunch of weird ones, right? So Trey Taylor's grandma, to me, we always talk about what is a real one. You had a Raiders hat ready to go at your draft party. You put that on your grandson, and then you bought season tickets. If that's not what a real one is, quite frankly, I don't know what it is. Spam Grandma Trey down below. Let's go to the next big takeaway, and this has been something that we've kind of talked about before of, Antonio Pierce. They really like when you can have these connections with past players, turn them into coaches like Carnell Williams, Antonio Pierce even himself. And he's the cousin of Ed Reed. And Taylor kind of goes on to say that when he was a little bit younger, talked to Ed a little bit, but then again, when he's little, Ed's in the NFL. And the older and older and older Trey got, right around when he was about 18, Ed started to reach out, talk to him a little bit more. Now he says he talks to him all the time and always wants to pick his brain. If you want to take that next step and you want to be a great player on and off the field, why not talk to your cousin Ed Reed, 2019 Hall of Famer, one of the greatest safeties to ever play this game. Let's go to the next thing. One of the things Graphk asked was all right, so tell me somebody that stood out to you this offseason, whether that's at minicamp, at OTAs, and it was ASAP Rocky of an answer. He was yeah, Tre Tucker was unbelievable. And where there's smoke, man, lot of fire starting to pop up here around Tucker. And I don't know what type of impact he's going to have. I don't know how many catches he's going to have, how many yards he's going to have. He did start to play better at the back end of last season. They're going to use him, and it's just yet another report. You know what I mean? You can already save this video. You can bookmark this one because it's another video. It's another report. It's another person saying, Tre Tucker looked like a different human being this offseason. Coming up here, I got Trey Taylor's thoughts about the offense, which I kind of like that Graphk did this just because, like he's a rookie, and sometimes when you talk about your side of the football, you're a little bit more, let's say, humble. Maybe you don't give the exact answers that you want. I've never met Trey. Maybe he's not that type of guy. But the answers he gave about the offense to me just felt like really authentic. It felt like a good answer. It felt like I was listening to Antonio Pierce compared to listening to Josh McDaniels. You could actually believe it. Now, to me, I do this show because the Raiders, it's a family. And the Raiders Report, it's a family. And it's the way that Chugs and I provide for ours. So if you could, hit that subscribe button. Help the Raiders Report family grow. Also, as Graphk says, wipe them feet because this is how we provide. And I also wanted to give some love to my guy, Graphk Raider, for having an awesome interview with Dylan Laube, Trey Taylor. It sounds like he's got another one coming up here. And again, I just wanted to bring more light on the offseason because there's a lot of really good Raiders content creators out there, a lot of my good friends, and Graphk is absolutely one of them. Let's go to the next thing here on some of the thoughts that Taylor had on the offense, which he said that the offensive line was really impressive this offseason and just, it's an extremely physical unit. And this team wants to win in the trenches. They want to win in the trenches on the offensive side of the football, defensive side of the football. And let's face it, our Raiders offensive line, every single day of practice, they're going up against the best defensive line in football. If you don't match that energy, if you're not bringing to the table what Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins are bringing, this is also him saying that they looked pretty damn good. This is also without Colton Miller. That tells me a lot. Taylor also kind of broke down that he expects to see a lot of 12 personnel and just kind of spoke about him being the safety and, kind of how confusing it can be when you don't necessarily know what play is coming. And then saying that the running game is going to be tough and that they expect to score a lot of points this upcoming season. When asked how he thinks he's going to make an impact on the season this upcoming year, he said that special teams will probably be where he's at. Now, he also said he was like, you're always going to have that mentality that you're going to try to get on the field. No disrespect to Trey Taylor. He's not going to get on the field over Marcus Epps or Trevon Merrick, at least not anyway. If one of these players goes down, sure, he's probably going to be competing with Isaiah Polamayo, Chris Smith to try to get some of those extra reps. But one player that, and I think this just kind of goes to show the type of guy that Taylor is, it was like, who's another player that stuck out to you? And he said Jaden Grant. And the reason why I want to give Jaden Grant some flowers is because if you don't follow the Raiders, Jaden is a player that a lot of people, myself included, I don't see him making the 53-man roster. They got a deep, deep safety group. But could this be somebody that ends up making the practice squad? They keep around a little bit. And I can remember Max Crosby posted on his Instagram story, happy birthday shout out to Jaden Grant. I ended up messaging Max and I was like, what do you like about him? And Max just basically told me that he was a dog. And, there's another example of Jaden getting some love from Max Crosby. And if you're getting love from the leader, the captain, let's face it, Max is the Raiders, right? You're getting love from him. That tells me something. Now you got another example of Trey Taylor, very well-respected player, very good head on his shoulders, getting some more love there. Jaden was also a player that in a few different reports this offseason was like, if there was one person that has taken that step forward, Jaden Grant has taken that step forward. All I'm saying is somebody to keep an eye on during training camp and during the preseason. Maybe one of my favorite things that Taylor said, and as soon as I heard it, I told Chugs when he walked into work today, I go, he said Tyree Wilson is a freak, and I actually chuckled because Taylor was like, I'm actually afraid to walk near Tyree just because of how just unbelievable of an alien that he is and just how big and massive that this dude is. So here's a picture of Tyree Wilson, and the guy that he's standing next to is about my size. I'm not a big guy by any means, but I also don't look this small. Tyree's just an absolute alien, and when you see pictures of him and then the picture that went viral of him at the Sack Summit, that's John Jenkins, one of the Raiders' biggest defensive tackles, and then next to him is Max Crosby, the best defensive player in the NFL. They look tiny. They look like tiny individuals. But here's another example of where there's smoke, there's fire, and you're seeing a lot of hype around Tyree Wilson. You know why? Second year in the NFL, second year with Patrick Graham, another year with Antonio Pierce, and he's finally healthy, and probably the most important, Chugs called it. Let's go to the next one here. Jakorian Bennett, great athlete. Taylor just kind of spoke about another player that, is really taking that next step and somebody to keep an eye on. Jakorian Bennett was a player that he threw out there and was just you can tell that he's a great athlete. And I am excited to see what Jakorian's able to do this upcoming season because he kind of reminds me a little bit of Trevon Merrick. And I'm not saying they remind me in the same stance from the way that they play the game, because they play the game totally different. But Jakorian was a great athlete. When Trevon Merrick was first coming out, he was a great athlete as well. Now, Merrick had a good first 1 year, okay? That second year, though, the first year in the Patrick Graham system, Merrick really struggled, and he kind of spoke about it being like, I was just out there thinking so much that I really wasn't able to go out there and react, and when I did react, I was one step slower. You can kind of see that with Jakorian here a little bit where, even Taylor talks about it where it's like, you could tell how athletically gifted Bennett is, and if he goes out there and he's not thinking so much and he's just going out there reacting, trusting his instincts, trusting that his team's going to be around him, knowing this defense a little bit better, you could see Bennett potentially flash some of that athletic ability, and the Raiders, quite frankly, they need it. I'm still a believer that this is going to be a team that ends up adding an outside corner because Hobbs is going to play in the slot, Jack Jones is going to be on the outside, but another example of Jakorian getting some love, and it could be one of the reasons why he continues to work with the first string with Brandon Facyson, and it could be another reason why this team hasn't gone out and they haven't signed any other corners on the free agent market. Next thing coming up here that we're going to be breaking down is he said Antonio Pierce is the perfect fit to be the head coach of the Raiders. And, I got to give Graphk some flowers here too, because Graphk was like, talking about Harbaugh and was like, hey, we liked Harbaugh a lot. And I think a lot of Raider fans, you got to love and respect what Harbaugh has done at the University of Michigan. Now he's an enemy. Now he's a rival at the Chargers. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Harbaugh can go F himself. But, Antonio Pierce was the right person for this current Raiders team because I think the Raiders, with Max Crosby being the leader, you take on the identity of your leaders. And if Antonio Pierce is going to be somebody that's going to run through a freaking brick wall, and if Max Crosby is the type of person that's going to run through a freaking brick wall, that kind of just goes all the way down. And when you hear just players just continuously talk about the only choice that the Raiders could have made was Antonio Pierce, and I agree that it was the perfect fit. More interview takeaways coming up here on the show. One person asked in a super chat, and he didn't really give the answer, which I'm not going to blame him for that. Kind of talked about Aidan O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and who could start. Said that it's been a really good competition between both guys. Did use the word mediocre, and I don't know if he meant to do it on purpose, but he said mediocre and that they could be good quarterbacks in the NFL, but said that they do a lot of things very, very similar, which, again, it's kind of what you would expect here, but I think that people want to know who's going to be the starting quarterback, but let's face it, you're not going to be able to find out who's the starting quarterback until probably we're a few days away from the Week 1 game against the Chargers. Next thing coming up here that Taylor talked about is Getsy running down throats, and really, really talked about just how physical and how tough that this Raiders running attack's going to be. And, for a safety, somebody that's used to playing up here a little bit closer to the box, you're going up against Zamir White, a physical offensive line, and that's going to be a very daunting task. Taylor said, Getsy wants to run the football a ton, and I know that some people out there, want us to air the ball out more, but, let's be real here. We got Aidan O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, two quarterbacks that aren't very good from NFL starting caliber standards. So it's another example of a player on our team saying that we're going to run the football a ton. So how about this? Zamir White, how many rushing yards for Zeus this upcoming season? If you're watching this live, I've asked you how many touchdowns is he going to score. I've asked you how many carries is he going to get. Based off of what I heard from Trey Taylor and based on the pictures that I've seen of Zamir White looking absolutely jacked, I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say here. How many rushing yards for Zeus this upcoming season? Another fun thing that I saw that, Taylor kind of talked about was he said that he played baseball at a little bit of a younger age. I don't remember what age he said, but he said he played with Prime and that Prime was the coach and that he's, good friends with Shador. He also talked about how he knows one of the other Sanders, and I don't remember the name that he used. Maybe it was Shiloh. I don't remember off the top of my head. But I think it's another example of somebody who his entire life he's been surrounded by people that have done things at a high level. And if you're seeing that early on, that can kind of lead you to going down the right path, which is what Taylor has done. One player that he also said that has been impressive this offseason was Michael Gallup. And, Taylor was somebody who's kind of from down here in the Dallas area. That's kind of how Graphk had the opportunity to meet him, had that in-person interview. It was probably 25, 30 minutes north from Dallas, where Jeremy and I do all of our filming here. But he said that Michael looked really good. And that, one of the things that one of our Cowboy sources told us that Gallup's basically running on one leg. based off of what Taylor said, I'm going to kind of wonder here a little bit more. Maybe I should be taking Michael Gallup a little bit more seriously, because for Taylor to say that he's running some good routes, that he looks healthy, that he looks like when you hear the name Michael Gallup, like to me, I picture Gallup 2 or 3 years ago, right? I don't really picture the Gallup that you see with the numbers that he had because he wasn't healthy last season. Based off of what Taylor said, my expectations for Michael Gallup have definitely grown a little bit. And then the last thing here, and I know I kind of broke down a lot of stuff again. Please go check out the interview for yourself. The final thing was Trey Taylor's got that Raider mentality, and he's got that mentality that Antonio Pierce wants, where I'm going to run through a brick wall, but I'm also going to be a family man at the end. And he's a really good person. And one of my favorite pictures that I saw was Taylor took time at the end, after the interview, after they ate some food, to be able to just hang out with a few Raiders fans, join up in a prayer. I don't care who you are, he don't have to do that. People don't understand that a lot of times, these guys are just humans too, and he's a young kid still, right? He's trying to figure out the way where he can go in the NFL. He wants to be the best player possible. But just hearing how fired up he was to be a Raider, just hearing how fired up that his family was to be a Raider, I'm telling you right now, man, I am rooting really, really hard for Trey Taylor to be a special, special player for the Silver and Black. And I do think that he's part of a long-term plan here of if the Raiders are unable to re-sign a Marcus Epps, if they have to choose between Merrick or Epps, you could see Trey Taylor step up here and be a really interesting fit, because to me, one player that I've just continuously said, could the Raiders go out and get and fit with a Patrick Graham defense? And I know a lot of my OGs know this name, Jabril Peppers. I think Trey Taylor's got a little bit of Jabril Peppers in him, and it could be an interesting fit to look at going forward on this Raiders defense. So before I wrap up today's show, one more time, shout out to Graphk. Shout out to Trey Taylor's entire family for pulling up for an in-person interview. It's not an easy thing to do, but I want you guys to go watch it. Go subscribe to the OLV Raiders Network here on YouTube. They got 25,000 subs, and just like everybody's got to start with one sub. Everybody's got to get to 1,000. Keep on helping Raiders content creators grow, because believe it or not, this is how we provide for our friends, how we provide for our family, and most importantly, how we provide for our dogs, Chuck and Sadie.